For nearly 40 years, Sarah Ferguson, the former Duchess of York, held a cherished civic honor, the freedom of the city of York. It was a symbol of her connection to the city, a wedding gift that marked her entry into the royal family. But on the night of March 26, 2026, in a move that was as stunning as it was inevitable, that honor was stripped away. The vote by the York Council was unanimous, a stark and public rebuke that perfectly mirrors the fate of her ex-husband, Prince Andrew, a few years prior. This dramatic fall from grace wasn't triggered by a single news scandal, but by the slow, damning trickle of revelations from an old and toxic friendship, her connection to one man, Jeffrey Epstein. The story of how she lost this title is a chronicle of public promises, private betrayals, and the final, irreversible severing of ties with a city that once celebrated her. The scene was the historic Guildhall in York. An extraordinary council meeting was called for one specific purpose: to debate and vote on the status of Sarah Ferguson. The motion on the table was simple and brutal: to withdraw her status as an honorary freeman of the city. Now, this title isn't just a fancy piece of paper. The freedom of the city of York is the highest honor the city can bestow, a tradition steeped in history. Its list of recipients is a roll call of the esteemed Sir Winston Churchill, Dame Judi Dench, and the Duke of Wellington. To be given the honor is a mark of true distinction. To have it taken away is an act of profound repudiation. The debate was brief, but the feeling in the room was crystal clear. York Council's Labour leader, Councillor Claire Douglas, didn't mince words, stating it was deplorable that anyone holding titles linked to the city had associated with Epstein after his crimes were public knowledge. She powerfully articulated the council's position. As the people of York would expect, holding this status requires upholding the values and behaviors consistent with such an honor. Those who continued to associate with Epstein after his crimes became widely known fall well short of these expectations. Liberal Democrat Councillor Daryl Smalley, who had previously led the charge to strip Prince Andrew of the same honor in 2022, drew a direct and damning parallel. He declared that the move showed the council stood with victims of sexual abuse, not with the best friends of pedophiles. The vote was unanimous. With that, Sarah Ferguson became only the second person in history to be stripped of the freedom of the city of York. The first? Her ex-husband, Prince Andrew. The symmetry was devastating, a public declaration that the toxicity of their shared association with Jeffrey Epstein had finally and fully contaminated their legacy in the city that once celebrated their union. But how did we get here? How did a once effervescent duchess arrive at this moment of public humiliation? The story is a tangled web of debt, denial, and a series of deeply compromising decisions. The story of Sarah Ferguson and the city of York began with so much promise. In 1987, a year after her globally televised wedding to Prince Andrew, the couple were gifted the freedom of the city. For Ferngie, as she was affectionately known, it was a high point. She was seen as a breath of fresh air in a stuffy institution, a vibrant and relatable figure. But behind the scenes, financial pressures were a constant theme in her life, both during and after her 1996 divorce. And it was this financial desperation that first publicly entangled her with the disgraced financier, Jeffrey Epstein. In 2011, the story broke. Ferguson was forced to publicly admit that she had accepted £15,000 from Epstein to help pay off mounting personal debts. The backlash was immediate. In a desperate act of damage control, Ferguson gave a now infamous interview, expressing deep remorse. She called her involvement with Epstein a gigantic error of judgment. Her words were carefully chosen, designed to create a firewall between her and the convicted sex offender. She said at the time, "I abhor pedophilia and any sexual abuse of children. I am just so contrite I cannot say. Whenever I can, I will repay the money and have nothing ever to do with Jeffrey Epstein ever again." For a time, that public declaration seemed to work. It was a clear line in the sand. She made a mistake, she apologized, and she was severing all contact. The public, for the most part, moved on. But newly released documents tell a very different story. A story that unfolds not in carefully crafted public statements, but in private emails that prove her promise was, in fact, a lie. The release of new Epstein files sent shockwaves across the Atlantic, and buried within the documents was correspondence between Sarah Ferguson and Jeffrey Epstein. The content was devastating. It didn't just contradict her public statements, it obliterated them. The most damning email of all came in April 2011. This was just a month after she had publicly disavowed Epstein and called her association with him a gigantic error. Instead of keeping her promise, she sent him a fawning, apologetic message. She described Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted pedophile, as a steadfast, generous, and supreme friend. She went on to humbly apologize to him for her public remarks, explaining that she felt hellaciously let down by her own actions. Her spokesperson has since claimed this email was sent under duress, following a threatening, Hannibal Lecter-style phone call from Epstein after her public apology. But for many, the damage was done. It painted a picture of a duplicitous relationship, one face for the public and a completely different one for Epstein. The revelation of her private actions, calling a pedophile a supreme friend, was a betrayal too profound for many to ignore. And once those emails were out, the house of cards that was her public life began to collapse. The fallout from the revelations was swift and brutal. The institutions and organizations that had once proudly associated with Sarah Ferguson began to flee, severing ties to protect their own reputations. The first to go were the charities. For decades, Ferguson had built her the damage spread. Her own charity, Sarah's Trust, announced it would be closing for the foreseeable future, its mission hopelessly compromised by the actions of its founder. Documents also showed that 6 companies linked to Ferguson had begun the process of being wound down. Every pillar of her public life was either crumbling or under threat. Just when it seemed the fallout couldn't get any worse, the scandal took on an international dimension. The focus shifted from the UK to the United States, where the original investigation into Jeffrey Epstein took place. U.S. Congressman Suhas Subramaniam, a member of the powerful House Oversight Committee investigating Epstein's network, issued a public call. He declared that he believed Ferguson had information related to the investigation and stated, "Sarah Ferguson should give sworn testimony to our committee." Suddenly, Ferguson wasn't just a disgraced royal figure. She was a person of interest in a major U.S. federal inquiry. While there is no legal mechanism to compel her to testify, the call itself was a deeply humiliating development, placing her in the same category as other powerful figures being scrutinized for their proximity to Epstein's crimes. Back in Britain, the royal family maintained its silence, but the action in York was seen as the final, formal decoupling of the Yorks from civic life, a brand now irrevocably broken by their own disastrous judgments. The unanimous vote in the York Guildhall was more than just the removal of a title. It was a final, public verdict on the character and choices of Sarah Ferguson. For nearly 4 decades, she held an honor connecting her to the heart of a great British city. Today, she is stripped of that honor, abandoned by charities she championed, her business interests reportedly in ruins, and facing calls to testify from a foreign government. Her story is a cautionary tale of second, third, and fourth chances squandered. After each scandal, she managed to come back, relying on public goodwill. But the Epstein emails changed everything. They revealed a calculated duplicity that could not be forgiven or forgotten. With her reputation shattered and her public platforms gone, the question that remains is not just what's next for Sarah Ferguson, but whether there can be any comeback from a fall this final.